All right, so welcome to today's webinar. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. So today's webinar is about gender equality in education. So basically, we're going to talk about gender and education, how we kind of focus on gender in educational context. So we're going to begin with a poem by Rosenberg, and it says, "Why is it she would hold both she and he, but he is only he? And why is it her would claim both her and he, yet him is only him?" So I have a question over here, and the question is, what do you understand from this very poem, and why is it so, depending on your understanding of the poem? Any volunteers to answer or comment on the question? Or just go ahead, please.
Okay, I think that women can do everything. They can carry everything. So in the word she, also they can carry he and she together.
All right. Any more comments?
And I think that women have many responsibility than men, and so it tells us, I think, that.
All right. Okay. So as you stated, even in the word she, we have both he and she together. And as Gizem said, a woman shares all the responsibilities. That means she has the responsibility of both men and women. So it is important that we make a distinction between the terms sex and gender. So we all know that sex is something biological, but gender is not. Gender is something more cultural and social factor that we assume in the society that we navigate. So it means basically that sex exists independent of us, but gender, it exists together with our understanding of the world. So since the 1950s, when Simone de Beauvoir wrote this very famous book, The Second Sex, we all know that gender is culturally and socially constructed. So we're not born as men and women, but we learn how to be a man or women throughout our kind of navigation in this life. So thinking of this issue at the back of our head, I'd like to draw your attention to an advertisement. We're going to watch an advertisement, and while watching the advertisement, I'd like to keep two very important questions in mind. The first one is, what is the purpose of this video, and what point is made in the video? So basically, you will see the screen kind of divided into two portions. On one portion, you will see the original ad, and in the next portion, you will see the reversed version of the ad. And so while watching the video, please pay attention to questions and try to watch the video just with these questions in mind. Dennis, can you make it full screen?
Yes. No, do you see it?
Yes, we do.
The offense really needs to score here, but this defense just isn't giving an inch. It's down to this last play. Interception! He's across the midfield. He's at the 40. The 30. 20. 10. Touchdown!
There are two sides to GoDaddy. The sexy side, represented by Brett Raffaelli, and the smart side that creates a killer website for your small business, represented by Thelma. Together, they're perfect.
if you go back to our two questions, so what is the purpose of this video? And what point is made in this video? So on the left side, we saw the original ad, and on the right side, we saw the reversed roles. And at the end of the video, it says, seeing men like this is ridiculous. So why isn't it with women? Any comments on the video? So maybe I can ask the question this way. Why do we use women in this way in ads, but not men?
Maybe like, it's like, a simpler question is like, are you familiar with any commercials similar to this one from Turkey?
Yeah.
Which commercials do you know? You don't watch TV? Merve, can you unmute the microphone? If you, yeah, okay.
I think it's about cultural dimensions because women, I think, would be accepted and more attractive. Therefore, women are used as a tool, I think. Yes, it's about cultural dimensions, I think.
All right. So you said we use, I mean, basically women are used as tools, right?
Yes, I mean, subliminal messages, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. So there are some hidden messages kind
Yes.
of try to be conveyed. So think about this chips ad. So there's this women, and if you eat probably these chips, you will get the pleasure of the hidden message. You got it over there, right? Mm-hmm. So, and it would be ridiculous to use men in this sense. And when I watched this video and this ad, it reminded me of the promotion of cars. When companies come up with a new car, they oftentimes, when they want to promote the car, they would have a female standing right next to the car and promoting the car. So when I was kind of around the age of 10 or 12, I used to ask this question, why isn't it a man but a woman standing right next to the car? So basically, I believe that oftentimes in such ads, women are commodified. So they're treated like products, some commodity, and they're used, as you said, they're used as tools to promote their products. Either it's women or men, or it's not an either or case, it could be both. So women are used as products to promote products of companies. So just the same thing we see here in the ad. All right. So to move on, so today's objectives for the webinar are to understand gender equality or inequality in the society and in English language classrooms, and to identify gender bias in classrooms, texts, and materials. Because as teachers, when we go into the classroom, of course, we have some materials, and it's important that we understand how women and men are represented in the textbooks or in the materials that we take with us to the classroom. And also to discuss the classroom strategies to promote gender equality in the classroom environment. So as teachers, what we can do to promote gender equality or to get rid of the biases and stereotypes that we have about the roles affiliated or attributed to men and women. All right, so there is one quote here by Simone de Beauvoir. So it says, one is not born, but rather becomes a woman. So just keeping this very quote in mind, I have 4 questions. And the first question says, what is gender socialization? Have you ever heard this term? If not, what do you think it could be about? Gender plus socialization. What does it mean? What do you understand when I say gender socialization?
I think it is about integration of genders, both men and women live together without any discrimination in society.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any more comments? Guys, Selçuk, Burak, Fatima.
I haven't heard this term.
All right. So even if you haven't heard, what do you think it could be about?
It could be about I haven't any comment not right now.
All right. Okay.
Hopefully, I have an idea.
Just go ahead, Mary, please.
Yes, I think it differs from society to society. For example, in our society, women have some responsibilities, as you said before. For example, women should cook, should raise children, etc. But it differs from another society. It could be different way.
All right. So what about gender bias?
Actually, it's again about gender bias. For example, women can't do something, for example, any job. For example, driver. Women can't be a driver.
Yeah, that makes sense, of course.
There are some specific frameworks, I think.
So oftentimes we kind of associate driving with men, so men can do it, but not women, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I add something?
Of course.
It can be a movement about destroying some ideas about men and women cannot do something maybe about it.
Can you just elaborate a little bit when you say
it's a movement about destroying some ideas about
the expectations from men and women?
Yes.
All right. Yeah, could be gender bias. All right. So thinking of these issues, have you ever experienced or observed gender bias in your own learning context, materials that you were taught when you were a student? Have you ever experienced something like this or just observed something like this? Maybe in your classroom, not necessarily in your classroom, you might have heard some stories from different people. All right.
I'll tell one. I think like a typical one is that, oh, you're a girl, you're a woman, like, you know, like you need to be a teacher, like that's the best profession because, like, you know, limited hours and then you can spend more time at home with your children and, like, you know, doing housework and cooking. So that's a typical gender stereotype, right? Like,
right. Yeah.
You need to be a teacher.
Even when we think about our own bad habits like smoking, so people would expect a woman smoking, no way. It would be a man who's smoking. So if it is something about health, it is harmful for both men and women. I mean, the harm doesn't make a distinction between genders. It harms both types of bodies. So why would we expect something like this from a man but not from a woman? And when we would be shocked or surprised, and not necessarily say surprised, but we would be shocked if we see a woman smoking. All right. So what about society in general? Just let's forget about our classrooms. What about our society? Society, I mean, it could be your immediate society. It could be the whole world. What kind of gender biases or problems do you see in the world considering the issue of gender equality or inequality?
Can I jump in?
Of course.
Yeah.
Well, segregated seating options for females and males in the society is very common. You know, wherever you go, you know, if you were to take a bus or, you know, go sit at the waiting lounge of a hospital, there are specific places where females or males would sit. Like for instance, in Trabzon, if you got onto public transportation, then it would be really hard for a male to sit next to a female. A female would have to switch, or another female would probably go sit next to the female, right where the empty seat is, and the male would go back to the other seat where he would be right next to a male,
Yeah,
So
yeah.
this would be a good example, like going back to the previous question, for instance, teachers, you ask about the general society and not the classroom environment, but in classes, oftentimes, we would be more tolerant of males, like, because I don't know if it's probably cultural, we would get to see more trouble causing by males. Maybe that's one reason. Same thing applies to the society in general. If you see someone doing harm in the society, drinking outside, doing something you would call silly, it would be okay if it's a male, but if it's a female, that would be an issue.
Right.
So
Exactly.
females are expected to sit still,
Right.
be kind, be gentle, use a
Confirming.
specific wording. If you were to go and yell to a public servant, at a workplace, if you are male, people would take it. But if you were a female, maybe they would be kinder to you, but they would also blame you for yelling or for using that kind of language because you're a female. You can't use it. It's only men are entitled to such language.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Because it's kind of expected that men have this power to kind of yell.
Yeah.
As you said, they are entitled this power in this society.
Yeah.
So let's go on with these slides. So what is gender socialization? So gender socialization is basically, it starts from our first breath to death at home. It starts at home and then goes on with the neighborhoods and the countries of residence. So it's something continuous. It goes on throughout our life. So in the society that we reside, that we share, the society that we share, there are certain expectations from genders. So as you said, well, we expect women to sit at home, take care of the kids, raise the kid, but men would go out and work and then earn money and bring money home, so food, blah, blah, blah stuff. So this is something that is kind of expected from men and women. So as people, as human beings, when we are born, we're expected to gain these roles and act accordingly. If we violate these roles, then we're not going through a gender socialization process, but rather we're violating the socialization process. As I said, it is not something stable, it is something continuous. So that means today we have a fact about in terms of expectation from men and women, that might change tomorrow. And then if it changes tomorrow, then we have to conform to this change and act accordingly. Otherwise, we will have some certain labels and we will be kind of labeled and maybe marginalized in the society. All right, so our next slide. And we're going to watch an ad. In this ad, we have a little child, and her name is Riley. And she has a lot of questions out there about the companies, their products. Let's just watch it and then we'll talk about it.
In the latest viral video, a little girl from Newburgh, New York named Riley takes less than a minute to clearly and concisely explain exactly what she thinks is really wrong with big business, unethical marketing practices, and gender roles. And whether or not you agree with her, you got to respect her passion.
It'd be fair for all the girls to buy princesses and all the boys to buy superheroes. Girls want superheroes and the boys boys want superheroes. The companies who make these try to trick the girls into buying the pink stuff instead of stuff that boys want to buy, right? Yeah, so then why do all the girls have to buy princesses? Some girls like superheroes, some girls like princesses. Some boy likes superheroes, some boy like princesses.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right.
Why does all the girls have to buy pink stuff and all the boys have to buy different color stuff?
She said it. Don't trick the girls into buying pink stuff and princesses. Some girls like princesses and some girls like superheroes. Some girls like pink stuff and some girls don't. If all of our complaints about the way society is going could be as succinct and articulate as this little girl's. Good on you, kid. I hope you follow it up with some rants about politics, too.
Wow. I guess her talk is very powerful in terms of like, we have certain expectations. So we would expect girls to go for pink and boys go for blue, and would expect girls to buy princesses and boys to buy like superhero characters and trucks. So, and she's questioning, why is that? I would also like as a superhero and I would go buy that one. So if I buy that, why am I questioned? Why is that? So the question is basically how we socialize girls and boys into the norms of the society. We have certain expectations. When they are born, we just cut their expectations and we try to mold, we try to shape them. And if they get out of this shape, just like little Riley, and question the things, then we would probably label them and marginalize them, and they would be the kind of violators of the society. So there we go. That's why we have certain expectations, and then we just put people into certain frames. So basically, this is my comment about the video, and if you would like to add something to the video, just go ahead, please.
I think I'll add one thing. So I have neighbors, and my neighbors have two kids, one 2-year-old, a boy, and one 4-year-old, and that's a girl. And they are from Spain, so their grandparents made them scarves, winter scarves, and mailed them here for Christmas as gifts. So Emma's scarf is, of course, pink, and has, so it's a scarf, but there are like, baby dolls attached to the scarf hanging. So it's very like, playful, but it's baby dolls. And Gabrielle's scarf is blue and has monsters instead of babies. So it's so typical, because the expectation is that because she's a girl, she's expected to grow up and have her own babies and look after the babies and be nurturing and caring. But boy, he plays with monsters that don't even exist. So this is part of our socialization. It's so implicit and it's so hidden in the way that we grow up that we don't even realize that we learn how to become a woman or a man. It's not a biological distinction. It's not like, women are more nurturing or weaker or more sensitive. No, we are actually trained, socialized to be like this.
Exactly. So it's like creating realities. So actually, we can talk about two different realities. The one reality that oftentimes is called brute facts. They exist independent of us. It's like just our sex. So we're born as men or women in terms of sex. It's independent of us. But gender is a social or constitutional fact. We create it. So let's just imagine the river marriage between Greece and Turkey. The existence of the river between both countries is independent of us. But we take the river as border between two countries. And this is a social or constitutional fact. We attribute this particular meaning to that river. It's almost the same thing. So we're born with a certain sex, but then we have gender roles, and we create these roles and these expectations, and then we expect babies, let us say babies, they could be female or male, and then we expect them to act according to these expectations because we created these facts. And if they do not abide or conform to our realities, then it's likely that we're going to have trouble over there.
Okay, so I think I'm going to continue. So what we have described so far is like gender as a social construct. It's not a biological, like, difference, but like that we talked about this, like, again, summarizing it, that we are socialized into these behaviors. I don't know if there was one YouTube video as well, run like a girl, dance like a girl, speak like a girl, like, we are expected to behave in certain ways. I'm going to move the discussion from gender as a social construct to where we are and what the gender issues are in Turkey. And the point that we are trying to make in this presentation is that we need to have gender equality across the education system, because, like, as teachers, that's our main duty to at least, make sure that both genders are equally represented and equally, like they are provided equal opportunities and etc. So that's why, like, I want to shift the gear towards Turkey a bit and talk about, like, what the gender issues are in Turkey. So our education system, it has 14 principles, and here in this chart you see all the principles. These are in Turkish. But there is one that I want to draw your attention to, and it's the first one. It's generality and equality. And it means that educational institutions are open to all persons, regardless of language, race, gender, disability, and religion. And no privileges can be granted to any person, family, group, or class in education. So this is as a principle, it sounds great, but what we can question, like, okay, are we really applying this? Are we not providing any privileges to any persons? Definitely no. That there are private schools, there are, like, private rooms within state schools. We know these things. We know, like, some parents are more influential and like, to the extent that they might even change, like, the students' grades, and lots of discrimination and lots of issues. But as a principle, we need to make sure that we provide equal education, equal opportunities to everyone, regardless of their language, race, disability, religion, and including gender. And this is important, like, so I want to show you some statistics to see if we have a gender balanced approach in education or in terms of literacy. So this is from UNESCO's database, and what you see here is that the blue line reflects the boys who are not in school between the years of 2008 and 2015. And then the blue line is for girls, and then the green line is the total, so both girls and boys. And what you see is that the blue line is higher than the red line across 7 years. That means that there are more girls who are not going to school than boys. And the gap actually kind of like shrunk in 2015, and that's a good sign. And there are, like, a couple of important projects that took place within this time span that we'll talk about in a bit. So I think they were very influential in that sense. This is the graph for those who are not working, but who are not, in school either, between the ages of 15 and 19. And this pie chart shows that probably 60 or 65% of the population is female and not working and not going to school. So we'll talk about what might be the reasons, but the first thing that comes to my mind, 15 to 19 sounds like, you know, marriage age in Turkey in some parts. So that might be the reason that they are not working and they are not in school at the same time. This is the illiteracy rate, meaning that they don't know how to read and write. And you see that this is from 2015. You see about 9% of our population, yeah, like, you know, about 9% of those who are not literate are female, while it's about, yeah, almost 2% of the illiteracy rate is that it's men. So we have a problem here. What we see based on these graphs is that females are definitely disadvantaged in terms of schooling and in terms of literacy rates, and it seems very high, especially when we take into consideration the illiteracy. Any questions about these graphs? So what do you think the reasons are behind these statistics? I mentioned one, right? Early marriage. What other factors? Do you know any girls around you, like, who are not going to school when they are supposed to be?
Actually, the reason lying behind this family, because every children has the same family structure, I think. It stems from family. Firstly, this kind of things should start with family, and therefore I think the most dominant one is family.
Yeah. So what might be the family's concerns for not sending their girl to school?
I mean, because as I said before, some family think that, for example, the girl wants shouldn't go to school or shouldn't educate.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other thoughts, Burak and Selçuk and Fatma and Gizem?
Maybe we add the child marriage for girls.
Yeah. Okay, let's look at the factors. So there are social and cultural factors. And like, I don't want you to think that these factors are like, you know, distinct factors, because they are dependent on each other, right? Like early marriage or child marriage, it's a social and cultural factor, such as also, like, you know, poverty is a socio-cultural factor as well. But maybe, like, you know, more specific ones are opportunity cost of schooling, lack of separate toilets for girls and boys, lack of female teachers. So some parents might be concerned about the dominance of male teachers in a particular school, violence at school or on the way to school. These are the reasons that are very specific to Turkey. But I know from the States that with the increase in school shootings, lots of families are opting for homeschooling these days. They don't want to send their kids to school. Distance to school, and low value placed on girls' education. So, like, you know, what are you going to do with this education? Like, you know, you're going to get married and have kids, so why you don't need education. Poverty is also another issue, because, like, you know, some so the mother might be working and the oldest sister might be taking care of the other siblings. So these are all actually connected to each other.
Then is just one point I'd like to make about distance to school. That is a very serious issue, I guess, in Turkey, because especially in villages, we have huge number of girls not going to school because they don't have school right in their immediate environment. And that's why they have to move to different places to study. But of course, families do not send them because they have this concept of namus, you know. So if they send, probably the girl would be in trouble and they would not be able to save the girl from the kind of the harm around. That's why they don't send them to school and to study to kind of pursue their career. So I just want to add this to these points.
Yeah. Yeah. So there were two. Do you know any campaigns launched in Turkey to promote girls' schooling?
Yes, there was a project that sent me to school.
Yeah.
I know.
What do you know about the project?
And they promote families to send their girls to school. And
yeah. Any other project? There was one before then. Okay.
There was a
Yes, Burak.
sorry.
Go ahead.
There was an advertisement about girls, but I couldn't remember all of the advertisement. But it was like that. I can do something. I can do this one. I can do this one. But I couldn't remember all the topic of the advertisement.
Okay. Yeah.
And I guess there are some famous figures in the ad, like some scientists. I can do
Yes.
that, which is right.
Yes.
Yeah.
There was a, I was going to.
Yes hocam, go ahead.
Haydi Kızlar Okula projesi. That's what I was about to say. You know, I just wasn't I wasn't sure about the dates today. I was thinking it was later than this date, but you're probably right and I'm wrong. 2001 and 2001. Haydi Kızlar Okula project that's supported by UNICEF and run by Minister of National Education. Yes.
Yeah, so that's the earlier project, and then the newer one is what you mentioned, like Dad Send Me to School. So these two projects have been really influential. We're not going to go into the details of it, but you can go into the link and see. Okay.
So gender equality in education, you know, there are some issues in terms of teaching and learning processes when we consider gender equality. And of course, there are some, the schooling has great impact on gender bias, which means like throughout our educational processes, the curricula, the teaching materials, the teacher himself or herself, and the teaching and learning processes could perpetuate the gender bias in the classroom. So if we consider teacher or the class, let's first focus on the teacher. We are human beings and we're all born into a society, and we are shaped, at least our ideas and notions are shaped by the society we're born into. So when we go into the classroom, it is very likely that we will have certain expectations from boys and girls, and we would kind of also orient our teaching process according to these expectations. And if we consider classroom materials, our selection of the classroom materials will be according to our, it will confirm to our expectations from certain genders. So let's consider, just previously we were talking about jobs and occupations. When we leaf through the pages, we will see that, well, a nurse or a teacher is oftentimes portrayed as female. And it would be very rare for us to see a man portrayed as a nurse or as a cleaner. And even if we consider the job of cleaning, we would see a black or a colored female figure doing that job. So it is kind of perpetuated in the course book material as well. So these are some of the things that we need to keep in mind when we go into the classroom in terms of teaching, in terms of selecting our materials. throughout our teaching process. So we're going to do a group work activity. I'm going to send a link to you right now in the chat box. So we're going to read a scenario. It's a kind of case. And in the case, there's a teacher and also students. And of course, there's certain steps of the teaching process applied by the teacher. And we're going to read the scenario. But while reading, there are two questions that I would like you to keep in mind. What problems are happening in the class? And the second question is, what could the teacher do to solve these problems? So I guess we're going to create the breakouts.
Yes. Okay.
And then the link is right in the chat box. Before we go into the breakouts, please choose a writer for the group so that when you discuss the questions, the writer will take some notes and then post the responses. So when we were in the main room, we're going to discuss our answers.
Mm-hmm. And also select a spokesperson to report back to the whole group, okay?
Thank you, Denise, for reminding that.
Yeah. Gizem, did you get the link?
Yes.
Okay. Are you all done reading the case?
Yes, I read.
Okay. I think I'll go find Selçuk because I think he dropped. But you know what you're doing, right? Like write your names. One person will be typing, you know, the answers, and then you'll report it back to the group. Okay. Okay. So who is taking notes? Selçuk, do you want to take notes? Selçuk, can you hear us? Sam, do you want to take notes?
Actually, I am joining with phone, so
Okay.
be a problem.
How about Myra?
Okay.
Okay. So what do you think is happening in this class? What are the problems that you're observing?
Of course, it's about gender inequality, not equality. The male students pacify the female students. Okay. Should I write?
Yeah. Gizem, what do you think?
Could you repeat that, please?
Sorry, I was asking Gizem what she thinks.
So there are many discrimination about, so it
Gizem, maybe turn off your camera and just have the microphone on. Okay. Selçuk, let's hear from you.
What was the question? I can't hear.
Did you read the case?
I can't get link actually. Therefore, I left the room to get the link, and I can't read the text.
Okay, should I send it to you, or should we read it to you?
I don't understand what did you say?
Okay, so there is a Google link with a case. Do you have the link? Should I send it to you, or?
I can't get the link. I don't have the link actually. Therefore I didn't read it.
Okay, so I'll send you the link. Okay.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, Gizem, is your connection back?
Yes.
Okay. Do you want to tell us the problems happening in this class?
Yes, there's a discrimination about gender, so the teacher should take the responsibility to engage all students into lesson, but the teacher doesn't do that. Actually, the teacher discriminates all students as female and male. So it creates that female students feel uncomfortable to speak. So actually, teachers should support and encourage female students when it's their turn, and the teacher should create more interactive and collaborative classroom environment, but it seems like the teacher doesn't do that, so it creates problem actually.
Selçuk, did you manage to read it?
Yes, I did. I did. In this case, actually, we can do random selection, stink arrangement. We can, as a teacher, we can motivate female students to answer questions, like we can try to remember some clues to answer questions. By the way, we can. This is the how can I? We can block the interruptions in the class, male interruptions. Show some examples. This is bad thing, interruptions. That's all.
Let me. So Merve, do you have any other suggestions to add? And I'll check on the other group in the meantime, and I'll come back. Okay.
Okay. We as a teacher.
In the classroom would be fantastic. So how could we do that, empowering female students?
Actually, I think that we can make some group projects to make students in cooperation, so they can know each other and they can think about each other, and they can learn how can do some exercises together. And
so I wrote project work to help students learn about each other.
Yes.
Learn about each other and also produce work together. All right, Fatima, you were just.
And I think, yes, okay. And I think the teacher can use
Selçuk, do you have an idea?
No. We can set a class environment according to random.
Are you all done?
Yes.
Okay. Selçuk, you said something about stick arrangement, or what did you say in the previous one?
I said that we can arrange a class like that, one boy, one girl sitting in near.
Oh, sitting in it. Okay. Well, yeah, sitting arrangement. Okay. Okay. Let's shall we go back? Marve, you have the notes. Who is going to report back to the other group?
I took some notes.
Okay. Do you want to report back to the group?
Dennis, can I add a few things before we move on?
Yes, of course, yeah.
Okay. Well, going back to the first question, we get to see examples of an example of a segregated classroom environment with a lot of classroom discourse issues where boys are more likely to be called up to answer. Even with the exercise that we are doing, I've just remembered something important. We usually give females the stereotypical roles, like clerical roles, because they are neat, they are tidy, you know what I mean, the females are always the ones to report for us, especially, in Turkey. Males are encouraged to correct their mistakes, but what happens with females? Usually we do it for them, like we give them a helping hand. Here in this example, we have men talking over females. They are usually allowed to speak over females, and females usually are quiet when males take the turn. There is a good example here of uneven ratio of student-teacher interactions. Usually males get to interact more with teachers, unless of course it's dominated by females, like ELT classes, then there is another story. But in usually K-12 classrooms, we get to see guys talking, females listening, and usually we tend to ask more questions. That's what I observe when I go to practicum sites. We see teachers asking more questions to males than females, and usually there is a minimal wait time for female answers compared to male ones. So through these facts, here's what we can do. A few suggestions that I can come up with, and some of you already mentioned them. We can actively integrate groups by not allowing self-segregation. That happens quite often, so we have to be creative as to how we can deal with this. We have to apply classroom rules fairly for both girls and boys. Using inclusive languages is really important. Like, there are some popular wordings that are really that are not really good. Like, you guys, for instance, is the first one that I come up with. And we have different expectations for males and females. We have to just set it aside and apply the same rules for everyone. And as teachers, there's something that I value a lot is teachers modeling gender balance with what they say and do. Oftentimes, we talk about gender bias, all these popular trendy things, but with our language, with our classroom behavior, with our classroom discourse, we basically we can't really we don't preach what we say. Basically, that's
Yes,
what I
exactly.
want to say. And one last thing I wanted to say was that we have to be clear about wait time, like whether it's, research usually says 3 to 5 seconds. I don't really care if it's 3 to 5 seconds, but we have to be as tolerant with females as we are with males.
Yeah. Hocam, you summarized all our webinars, so we can go home now.
Okay, great. That was the idea.
Anything else? I'll send it.
Okay, maybe don't send it yet, because like once you send it, like you may not be able to see it. So let's report and then submit it.
Okay.
Okay. So okay, having said this, and who wants to report this back again? I'm asking one last time.
Is there any volunteer?
I could be what I have some internet connection problems, so it can be a problem.
Yeah.
No problem. Yes.
Okay. So let's do it, Merve.
Okay.
And then after you report, you can submit it. Okay. Okay, so you need to say leave breakout room. Okay, so just go back to the main.
Okay.
Okay, Dennis is back.
Okay, let's start with our group maybe first, when we are dealing with a technical issue. So in the meantime, Merve, you can report.
Okay. First of all, I will start with the first question. We discussed it, and it's about gender inequality in classroom environments. There is a discrimination in the class. The boys are dominant. On the other hand, girls are ignored, especially by the boys. And for the second question, the teacher should not discriminate the students as male or female ones. And also, teacher should support them to speak comfortably. And also, we as a teacher can motivate the female students to involve the class. In addition, we should give equal chance to all the students. For example, we can ask some questions that the female can answer to encourage them. And lastly, we can create group work activities in order to engage all the students.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything else that you want to add, Salçuk or Gizem?
Yes. Also, we should support and encourage female students when it's their turn.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So Marve, if you can submit your responses, we'll see them here.
Could you repeat that, please? I couldn't hear you.
If you can submit your responses as well, we'll see them here.
Okay, I'll do it.
Yeah. And I think now we can hear from Fatima and Burak and Adnan.
Okay.
And do you see your responses here?
Yes, we can see the responses. Okay. You are going to start with talking about the problems, and then Fatima will go on with the solutions to the problems.
Okay. Can I start?
Yes, Burak, please.
Okay. We identify a lot of problems about this subject. First of all, students has no chance to learn something about each other. Secondly, there is a problem about management, classroom management on the side of teacher. Thirdly, there is a problem about activities because there is no activity which encourage students to work as pairs or groups in a collaborative way. On the other hand, one of the problems is about the misunderstanding or communication problem between girls and boys, and also there is a feedback problem.
What do you mean?
Sorry?
What do you mean by feedback problem?
Fatima will explain.
Okay.
Okay.
Excuse me, we cannot send.
Okay.
Pardon me. We cannot send it.
Why not?
You see your screen, the screen you're sharing with us, but we cannot see the responses that we have typed up.
Did you submit it?
Probably not.
No.
So you need to go back to your screen, not my screen, and submit it. Did you lose the screen? The page with your responses?
I think.
I'm sure it's somewhere there open. Okay.
Feedback somehow, I don't know.
If you'd like to keep going with Fatima, and then in the meantime, Servet Hoca and Merve kind of try to work on that.
Okay.
Will that be okay?
Yes.
Okay, let's go. Let's continue, Fatma. You need to unmute your microphone.
Sorry. First of all, I will speak about the solutions. We have decided to, first of all, identifying the sources of problem in the classroom. And then we decided to change the sitting plan. Also, we decided to change the activities like throwing ball. Activities to cooperate the students. For example, she can give some project work to students. They can work together, both girls and boys. And also teacher can use a box to choose the names of the students, and in this way the same students will not speak. She will choose randomly.
Okay.
That's all.
Anybody else wants to share something? Okay. Adnan, should we continue?
Please.
By the way, we submitted our responses.
Yes, we can see 4 different responses right now.
I mean, I think you did, right? You submitted it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
We were in the full screen mode. That was the problem. We figured that out.
Okay.
Sorry.
Do you see the PowerPoint?
Yes, we can see.
Okay.
All right, so let's go on with the PowerPoint. So gender equality in education, and we have more issues. So in terms of designing our lesson plans and thinking about the problems related to gender issues, we can say that female and male teachers tend to pay less attention to girls than boys at all ages and in various socioeconomic and ethnic groupings in all subjects. And oftentimes teachers are not aware of this fact. Well, even if you say that, well, you do this kind of, let's say not discrimination, but you do not provide equality in the classroom in terms of females and males, they would not accept it because they have the very strong belief that they do have equality in the classroom. And girls receive less behavioral criticism, fewer instructional contact, and fewer high-level questions and academic criticism, and slightly less praise than boys. Because the root or the origin of that problem could be the belief that we believe female students are not smart enough like boys or as boys are. That's why the question that we pose to female students as teachers, the question that we pose oftentimes address law level of thinking if we consider Bloom's taxonomy. And also, while girls volunteer to answer questions that as often as boys, they're less likely to call answers out. Just like the case, just like the phenomenon in the case that we have just worked on. So they raise their hands, but they're not given the chance to talk as much as boys can speak in the classroom in terms of answering the questions. And as I said before, teachers are really not aware of their differential treatment of girls and boys. And there are a lot of studies out there proving that teachers are not aware of the differentiation or let's say the inequality they kind of cause in the classroom. And even if they are warned about that, they would not accept that because they believe they have this equal, they have this ideal environment in the classroom in terms of providing opportunities for boys and girls to speak out. And by placing a lower communicative and prestige value on girls' contributions, teachers are reinforcing the cycle of injustice. Because, you know, if they keep doing that in the classroom, it is very likely that this kind of cycle, the social injustice cycle in terms of gender will perpetuate in the classroom. And that perpetuation will lead to more problems in terms of gender equality.
So you were going to say something? No, no. Go ahead.
No. I was going to continue.
So I'm going to continue. So what we looked at was more interaction patterns between teacher and students, and also like, student and student. So what I'm going to talk about is the, so shifting the attention towards classroom interaction to classroom materials. So how do you feel that English language textbooks and teaching materials are representing or portraying females and males? Do you think there is equal representation, or it's unequal, or it's perpetuating stereotypes and gender bias? What do you think? What are like women doing in textbooks or represented as doing? Have you ever noticed? Think about professions, like, who does what? Do you see a woman like, astronaut or an engineer?
Or scientist?
No?
Burak was just raising his hand, and I guess he has something to say.
Who? Burak? Yes.
Yes. Actually, we are evaluating a book, course book today with Fatima. Evaluate a course book. In the book, there are some problems about gender equality. For example, always girls cooking and boys washing car, or they are always boys generally goes job, and girls generally cleans house and also cooks, etc. It's a problem, I think.
Anybody else?
I have checked the fourth grade textbooks because I have gone to do a fourth grade in technical science, and there is a unit called cartoon characters, and all the pages includes male superheroes, not any women heroes, superheroes. And I have recognized this.
Yeah.
They should just was raised by Riley.
Yes.
Little girl in the video.
Yeah. There is actually an article about like, all the superheroes are white men.
Yes.
Yeah.
There are fewer female characters in textbooks, and when there is a female character, that character always portrays certain characteristics, certain traits that are the bias, like, they are naive, fragile, oftentimes good looking, well behaved, whatever attributions that you think of, about females,
Yeah. There is actually a book called Rebel Girls. I don't know if you heard. Bedtime stories for girls. So it's like it's a kid's book, probably like age 5 to, I would say, like age 12, and it's translated to like probably like 30 languages. It's very famous. So it has like 1 or 2 pages of like of an important like woman figure in the history in a story format. It's like it's written for kids and like most like female kids to inspire them, and it was very famous in Turkey as well. But it's not the Ministry of Education, but it's Talim Terbiye, or one of those institutions, said that the book should be treated like porn. So they said this cannot be a kid's book. It's very dangerous for our society and for our kids, and it's not banned, but it's not sold as a kid's book. So it's probably in the back of a shelf somewhere. Yeah. So the problems with textbooks is that they promote rigid roles and create stereotypes. So it's like, Adnan Hoca and Serhat Hoca said, you see superheroes as men, or, as you mentioned, like women cooking or cleaning, and, like men go and, they have like professions. They are the lawyers or the doctors. So you see these, gender stereotypes, and sometimes this is more unfortunate, like present women at a disadvantage in the nature of roles. So think about all the fairy tales. Like women are in need and sensitive and fragile and waiting to be rescued. Yeah. Little Mermaid, which I also like I like, like animations and cartoons, but it's criticized a lot because, was it April? What was her name? Anyways, that Little Mermaid, she has given up all her life, her family, everything, for someone that she barely met once. So like, women should do everything for love, to go after their Prince Charming, but like, men are just men. So these are some representations. Women are frequently undertaking domestic activities, raising children, doing housework, cooking, cleaning. Men rarely involved in domestic activities, which leads domestic work to be seen as women's work and inappropriate for men. Yeah. So I want you to look at this image taken from a textbook. What do you see here? Do you think this is problematic, or this is something that we can use in our classes?
I think we can use.
Why?
Because I can see that a policeman is a girl, and also
those are men, Burak.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's wrong. I agree with you.
We have just two figures representing women, right?
Yeah, number 3 and 6, yes.
Right.
We shouldn't.
So 4 out of 6 are men.
Yeah. So there is imbalance in terms of representation. That's more a quantity problem, but in terms of the quality, like the content, like, police officer, male. I think this is an architect or construction worker, doctor, driver or carrier, all male. And then look at what like women are doing.
Milking the cows and working as a cashier, I guess.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so in terms of sexist language in textbooks and the things that like we should pay attention to, we should look at the gender composition of the dialogues. What does this mean? This means that look at like, who talks more, who says like, more, and who says what. Like, if the women are like, giving a voice, or they are interrupted, or they are just like, providing a response or not asking any questions. So who speaks most in a mixed sex dialogue? Who speaks first? Who speaks more? What language functions do the males and females exemplify? Are males asking the questions and females are subordinate and responding, or is it equally distributed? So in terms of like, females and the representation in textbooks, females tend to be quieter, younger, relatively inactive. So like, more in a subordinate position, relatively rare or invisible. So in the case that we saw, like, there are 4 male characters, 2 female characters, speaking proportionately less, of lower status and stereotype occupations, like, you know, being a housewife or a teacher or a secretary. Responders rather than initiators of conversations, and more often defined in relationship to the opposite sex. And this is really important because, you know, if again, like if you think about the stories that we know the characters in relation to who they are in the relationship to the male figure. So this is important. Yes.
Can I say something? Or
yes, of course.
Okay, and there are times when they are quieter, or you know, they are actually visible, but it often works towards their towards other biases. Like there is derogation of women. Oftentimes, if they are the ones who are talking, they are either gossiping, or they are in a manipulative style, or they are you know, jealous of someone. You know, there are those traditional roles, and as you mentioned before, you know, it's like they are often younger, but when they are older, they become jaddu. But when a man becomes older, it becomes a wise man. You know, it's just, you know, those type of stories.
Yeah, exactly. So what can we do? We need to find a way to, like, you know, have like maintain gender. First of all, you know, challenge the status quo. Second, establish gender equality, because, you know, that's the first step. So we'll provide some suggestions, and then we'll make suggestions in terms of materials and resources as well. So first of all, provide the same advantages and disadvantages for boys and girls. If you are giving, so like think about when I was a student, what was it called? Like öğrenci başkanı, right? Classroom.
Sınıf başkanı.
Sınıf başkanı, sınıf başkanı. Like, it was all, like, you know, male students, like all my male friends got to be the sınıf başkanı, and not that I wanted to be one, but maybe I wanted to be one, but I thought, like, hey, like, you know, I'm a girl, I should. That's the other thing. So provide the same disadvantages and advantages. Gender neutral curricula. So how do we do this? Equal productivity and empowerment of boys and girls. So show, like, you know, use materials that are free of gender stereotypes and that won't, like, perpetuate stereotypes and bias, and show, like, you know, women in strong positions. Like, you know, women, there is a movie of 3 Black women who work for NASA, and who helped, like, you know, one of the rockets to go on the space, but nobody speaks of them. And it's a really good movie because, like, you know, women actually achieve amazing things as well. We need really good role models. We don't need, like, you know, these commercials showing us that we need to have a beach body and look sexy and hot and you know, and men can look, you know, however they want. We need to show our kids, like both boys and girls, that women can be successful. So I talked about this, like, you know, the materials should be free of gender bias, stereotypes, and discrimination. So the other important suggestion is that to cultivate gender awareness. So, like, you know, with this webinar, now you are aware of gender discrimination or gender bias. So when you look at a material, you can decide for yourself if this is something that you want to use in the classroom, if it's going to perpetuate stereotypes, or if it's something that you should actually share with your students and cultivate gender awareness. So compensate for gender bias in course materials, include materials that will empower students, create more interactive and collaborative classroom exercises, going back to the case 1 that we saw, you know, very teacher-centered classroom, teacher is the authority, and the teacher asks questions and the students answer. But rather than, you know, this teacher-centered classroom, if you have group work activities and pair work activities and match students, not as like, you know, girl, or like, you know, boy, but like, you know, like mixed gender groups, then they will work collaboratively and they will understand each other. Accommodate students who have different learning styles. This is not only for gender, but for all learning styles. We have audiovisual learners, kinesthetic learners. I'm sure you studied these in your classes. So like, you know, use a variety of materials. Don't just rely on text or textbooks, or just like, you know, materials that include like, you know, words and readings, but like include audio or video, or just like, you know, graphs, like, you know, teach them how to read a graph. Like this is something we never do in our classes. And in group activities, assign rotating tasks and roles in each group. So like, you know, within a group, give them roles, like the way that we did, like somebody takes notes, somebody, you know, asks the questions, somebody reports back to the group, and then rotate these roles constantly so that your female students don't end up doing the secretarial work, and the male students have more like, you know, administrative or management related roles. So just go beyond these stereotypes. Change the group membership constantly so that different people work with different members of the classroom. And this is something that we worked on already, the teacher-student interaction, and you need to be really careful in terms of this. You need to move around all the time. You shouldn't take the center position, just like, you know, staying in front of the blackboard, but like, you know, walk around the classroom. Sometimes I just kneel down to get to their level, like because the students are sitting and you're standing, and you can't really communicate like this. So just like I just kneel down, and the students feel weird, but like I hear them, and I like, you know, I can look at their faces, like, you know, just reduce the authority. You don't need that kind of authority in the classroom. You need to make eye contact with your students. Servet Hoca actually mentioned this during the breakout session, waiting longer before calling on students to speak. So, you know, when we ask you a question, we wait. We wait for you to volunteer and say something. And then after enough, like, you know, wait time, you say, oh, like Selçuk, do you want to say something? Or Merve, do you want to say something? But you need to wait first. You need to give them, and also like think about, you know, when somebody asks you a question, you think, right? Like you need to formulate a response. So give them that time. Establish norms such as raising the hand to answer the question. Burak actually used, I think, our hand raising option for the first time. And I actually don't, I think I saw it once, but Burak, if you can share us, like, you know, what you did so that the next time when people are taking turns or want to take turns, Adnan raised his hand. How did you do that? You're mute, yes.
Just right above the chat box, you see that hand, just click on it, and then it just appears.
Oh, so you need to have the chat box open.
Right, it's just right on the left, and it's, you can, I mean, merge the signs, you can make it very small, so it doesn't occupy a lot of space on your screen. It's very easy.
Okay.
Just pull the arrow right this way, it will be very small.
Okay, try doing it. I think once you raise your hand, to lower your hand, or do I need to do it?
I do.
Okay, so yeah, don't forget, like, so once you take a turn, make sure you lower your hand after your turn, so that, yeah, because it sends us a warning that your hand is up. That's right. Good to know. Continuing, supporting and encouraging female students when it's their turn to answer. So give them equal opportunities. Don't call on the male students, and try to avoid interruptions as much as possible. And this is actually difficult. And even like, you know, I'm struggling with this in my own classes, because like if they are not, sometimes like they are, some classes, they just raise their hand and take turns, but like some classes, they just like jump in and like, you know, and claim a turn. So you need to come up with like, you know, strategies to make sure that they raise their hands. And I said this like, you know, in the middle of the semester, because my students complained that the others were jumping in and cutting. And I said, okay, like, you know, everybody needs to raise their hands because we need to make sure everybody gets a voice, but still like, you know, people jump in. So this is really important, and it's something that you need to keep in mind. And you need to alternate, of course, between calling on female and male students. So don't call on the same students all the time, because also they are willing to talk. Yeah. Yes. This is the last one, is very important. Invite students to participate and pay attention while they are talking. So what happens, especially like, you know, in language classes, is that once somebody is giving a response, the others don't listen. And this is very problematic. And also I think it has lots of like, you know, layers of problems, because I think to me one problem is that because you're not asking a genuine question and they are providing a formulaic response, like nobody is interested in what I'm saying in the class as a response to the teacher's question, because everybody knows the response. But like, you know, by asking like, you know, genuine questions rather than questions that that you know the answer and everybody else knows the answer, might be a start to solve this problem. So we need to be able to listen to each other and what we are saying.
And sometimes the issue with the last point could be about, for example, we have prep schools, prep class students. So when I raise a question, one student answers and the others are not listening because they are busy with preparing their own answer. So because they are kind of a little anxious because they would not be able to build sentences correctly. So what I do is like, so one student speaks and then I take the answer of that student and turn it into a question and ask the other students to respond. So that kind of, you know, helps them to pay attention to their friends as well.
Yeah, because they have to listen to their like friend to be able to answer that question. So if you make this a routine, they'll know that, okay, I have to pay attention.
Exactly.
Yeah. So one other thing, concept that we need to discuss is non-sexist versus anti-sexist curriculum. Does anyone have any idea what they refer to? What's the difference between non-sexist versus anti-sexist curriculum? I see no hands. No,
because we have 2 people left.
2 people left. They probably dropped the connection, yeah.
Yeah, 2 of them dropped off the connection. One went to a meeting at the dormitory to act out the computer.
Okay. We need to finish up soon, otherwise it's going to be you and me, Adnan.
Presenting to each other.
Okay. So non-sexist curriculum is free of gender stereotypes and other forms of distortion. So this is, you know, when you, for instance, choose your materials accordingly and have an equal distribution of gender roles, or give equal opportunities to your students regardless of gender. This is what you have. But what we want you to do is anti-sexist curriculum. That is like, you know, you challenge the status quo. You constantly ask questions to your students about these issues to raise, cultivate gender awareness, so that you actually dismantle this inequality in this society. Okay. So for instance, instead of showing a picture of a woman cooking, show like, you know, show 2 of them, or show just like, you know, a man cooking in the kitchen, so that you are actually disrupting the stereotypes. Or another example is that girls don't need to wear pink or play with pink toys and choose princesses. Show images of a boy and doing the same thing. So reverse the orders, like the commercial that we showed early at the beginning, and go with those materials. Then they'll think about, okay, yes, we are, we live in in an equal society where female and male differences and stereotypes exist, and we live with these, even we are talking about this, but we also hold stereotypes, and we are actually living towards certain expectations because that's how we are socialized. But we need to find ways to destroy these stereotypes. Yeah. Okay. Adnan, are you continuing?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm going to continue. So sometimes we might bring literature texts into our classrooms. And when we bring these materials into the classroom, it is important for us to bring different materials written for women or about women or by women, so that we can have more voice on the side of the women in the classroom. So for example, if we're going to bring an image or a drawing, that drawing could be done by a woman. So we don't have to bring something drawn by a man, and we already have this dominating of the man in the classroom. But if we bring something by a woman, that would kind of bring some kind of equality or balance the unequal proportion of the distribution of gender in the classroom. So we can cite or discuss or include women as well as men in authorities about various topics as well. So for example, when we talk about, let's say we're focusing on teaching about simple past, and we would like to use some famous figures from history of science. So oftentimes what we see is like Albert Einstein, Thomas Edison, but we know that there are a lot of famous scientists out there as well. So why don't we just bring Marie Curie into the classroom and teach simple past using the life story of Marie Curie? So that could be a solution to this problem. And if you just visit the website here, you will see a lot of women who are really famous, and they contributed to the whole world and the society a lot. And their life stories could be classroom materials for us as well. Also, when we think about women in the classroom, so we can just go to health as well. So oftentimes we see doctors represented as males in the classroom, but why don't we just bring female doctors as well? We have Canan Katay, and who's a very famous doctor, I would say professor. We can just take her as an example and bring her story into the classroom and use her as an example. And oftentimes teachers feel uncomfortable with providing or emphasizing women in the classroom, because they feel that if they put overemphasis on women, they will kind of perpetuate the inequality, gender inequality in the classroom. But we should keep in mind that, well, to provide equity in the classroom, it is sometimes useful to spare more room for groups that are at risk in terms of representation. So we can bring more female figures in the classroom not to kind of cultivate equality, but equality and equity, so that we can empower women in the classroom as well through our materials, of course. And we can also use picture storybooks. Here are some examples. Indeed, two of these storybooks were used by one of our students in the previous project. These were Amazing Grace and William's dolls. So that was Nejati. Nejati worked with his practicum site students. They were, I guess, secondary level students, and they read the story and they turned them into some performance and they acted it out. And as far as I remember, the students who participated in the performance were kind of labeled as problematic students. So indeed, these students did a great job out there, and they acted out their roles really well, and they performed the play to the all the students and their parents as well. And I'm sure this kind of activity gave the students really power to be heard. And in these stories, the roles are reversed. One of the project, for example, one of the stories was about Paperback Princess. So
we'll talk about it.
Oh yeah, right. Okay, my apologies. Okay, that's an activity indeed, right? So when using children's and young adults literature, we need to be very careful with our lesson planning as well. There are a few questions that we have to bear in mind. So the first question is, do the characters, the characters in the storybook, represent masculinity or femininity in ways that may surprise students? So what I mean by surprise is that, is it going to perpetuate the stereotypes or reinforce the gender biases that we have regarding gender equality? Or the storybook that I'm going to use in my classroom will do something reverse and surprise the students that something done by a female character could also be done a male, or vice versa, something done by a male could be done by a female character. And that would give the students the lens to look at issue through a critical perspective and kind of deconstruct the stereotypical understanding of men and women's role and reconstruct it. And the second question would be, how will the characters help students go beyond the arbitrarily defined binary constructions of gender? So we know that we have certain expectations from men and women. So the storybook that I'm going to use in my classroom should kind of violate, in quote unquote, violate expectations and raise critical thinking in the classroom, so that my students will kind of question the roles or the expectations of gender on the side of the society and bring a new lens into the classroom. And also, will this book provide students a bridge to a greater intercultural understandings of gender that cross from their world to those of English dominant societies? So we all know that for example, in Turkish community or the communities in Turkey, there are certain expectations from different genders. But what about other cultures? What do people, as women and men, do in these cultures? So the material that I'm going to take to my classroom should provide a chance for our students to see what is happening in the other societies regarding gender roles. Lastly, what community-based activities might be appropriate extension activities to support gender equality and add correct and concreteness to learning? So obviously our students are going to deal with the material and will have some takeaways from the classroom, but of course it is important for the students to relate what they have learned in the classroom to the community and take a critical lens towards the community and do something about it, take action indeed. So in terms of implementation, we can ask critical questions to brainstorm about issues related to gender roles and gender bias about the characters in the stories or the literary work. So what concerns you? Which of these issues concern your family and your community? So basically what we're doing is we're posing some questions and leading students to relate their background to the story, and so that they can have some kind of relation to the story and the characters as well. And also discuss how different cultures accept different roles in society. So in language classrooms, we have definitely culture out there. So we have also students' own cultural background. So we can just make a T-chart and ask students, well, this is the case and like state the cases about gender roles in Turkey, and also what the material that you have here. So just make a list of these roles and compare them. And discuss how these gender roles can affect meaning of a text. So let's say we have certain roles in the material that we have in the classroom, and we might ask the question, what if the roles are changed? And then what would happen if the roles are changed? And how would the text would sound to you if the roles were reversed? All right. And also ask students if the behavior of the characters in the books is the same or different as from the gender roles that they are familiar with in their culture. So which means they're going to kind of make a comparison between their cultural luggage and also the roles existing in the material that they're dealing with.
Okay, so here's what we are going to do. Having said all of these things in terms of how we should be using literary books or like, kids stories to raise gender awareness, we're going to show you one very short story. We'll actually, this is a book, of course, but we'll show you the YouTube video version of it. And we want you to focus on, we don't need to do breakout session for this because we are only 4 or 5 people here. So we'll just play the video. And for Marva and Selçuk, I want you to think about what's the plot of the story, what makes this storybook different from other storybooks, what have you observed regarding gender roles in the story, and do the gender roles confirm or clash with the gender roles in your society? Why or why not? So here's what we're going to do. We'll discuss these. I'll play the video and then we'll discuss these questions. Oh, this is the link.
Princess, story by Robin Walsh, Elizabeth was a beautiful princess. She lived in a castle in an expensive princess's palace.
Can you hear?
Not really well.
Okay, let's try again.
She was going to marry a prince named Ronald. Unfortunately, a dragon smashed her castle, burned all her clothes with his fiery breath, and carried off Prince Ronald. Elizabeth decided to chase the dragon and get Ronald back. She looked everywhere for something to wear, but the only thing she could find that was not burnt was a paper bag. So she put on the paper bag and followed the dragon. He was easy to follow because he left a trail of burnt forests and horses' bones. Finally, Elizabeth came to a cave with a large door that had a huge knocker on it. She took hold of the knocker and banged on the door. The dragon stuck his nose out of the door and said,
"Well, a princess. I love to eat princesses, but I have already eaten a whole castle today. I am a very busy dragon. Come back tomorrow."
He slammed the door so fast that Elizabeth almost got her nose caught. Elizabeth grabbed the knocker and banged on the door again. The dragon stuck his nose out of the door and said,
"Go away. I love to eat princesses, but I have already eaten a whole castle today. I am a very busy dragon. Come back tomorrow."
Wait!
shouted Elizabeth.
Is it true that you are the smartest and fiercest dragon in the whole world?
"Yes,"
said the dragon.
Is it true,
said Elizabeth,
that you can burn up 10 forests with your fiery breath?
"Oh, yes,"
said the dragon. And he took a huge, deep breath and breathed out so much fire that he burnt up 50 forests.
Fantastic,
said Elizabeth. And the dragon took another huge breath and breathed out so much fire that he burnt up 100 forests.
Magnificent,
said Elizabeth. And the dragon took another huge breath. But this time nothing came out. The dragon didn't even have enough fire left to cook a meatball. Elizabeth said,
Dragon, is it true that you could fly around the world in just 10 seconds?
Why, yes.
said the dragon, and jumped up and flew all the way around the world in just 10 seconds. He was very tired when he got back, but Elizabeth shouted,
Fantastic! Do it again.
So the dragon jumped up and flew around the whole world in just 20 seconds. When he got back, he was too tired to talk, and he lay down and went straight to sleep. Elizabeth whispered very softly,
Hey, dragon.
The dragon didn't move at all. She lifted up the dragon's ear and put her head right inside. She shouted as loud as she could,
Hey, dragon!
The dragon was so tired, he didn't even move. Elizabeth walked right over the dragon and opened the door to the cave. There was Prince Ronald. He looked at her and said,
Elizabeth, you are a mess. You smell like ashes, your hair is all tangled, and you are wearing a dirty old paper bag. Come back when you are dressed like a real princess. Ronald,
said Elizabeth,
your clothes are really pretty, and your hair is very neat. You look like a real prince, but you are a bum.
They didn't get married after all. The paper bag prince.
Okay. So going back to our questions, what's the story here? How would you summarize this story?
Selçuk, would you start?
Yeah. Selçuk?
The story, okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Story is about the man. I'm thinking relationship, but between gender and story, gender equality and story. But I guess I don't have any idea story and gender equality.
How would you summarize this story in one sentence? If you want to say something about this book to a friend, let's say like, Burak is not here. So you want to tell Burak, oh, we watched a video and it was about what?
The story is the story summarizes the matter. Gender responsibilities change to context, situation.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think it's about men's poverty actually, because the prince saves the princess.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and also the princess should well behave, good looking actually,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not important how the prince looks like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So how is this book different from the other storybooks that we have read and know really well?
I couldn't hear you.
How is this story different from, let's say, like, Cinderella, Snow White, the other stories that we know?
I mean, in terms of our...
Go ahead, Adnan.
In terms of our expectations from the characters in the stories. So, we have the prince and the princess. What would our stereotypical expectation be from these characters? Who would be saving whom?
Can I talk?
Yes, of course.
In the normal situation, the prince can fight the dragon, but dragon eats him, and this shows that men are not as much as men are not powerful as much as dragon, and this is different from we learned, we taught. That's all.
Mm-hmm. What makes those situations normal, that the prince saves the princess?
Can you repeat?
What makes those situations normal, that the prince saves the princess? Why did you say like in a normal situation?
Because the cultural stereotypes.
Yeah.
For example, we have some stories, and if the woman keep alive, any prince or any male character should come and kiss her, and we have some kind of stories actually.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So females,
yes, Hujam.
Also, females are considered not to be too smart, but here, as you can see, she doesn't go fight the dragon. She actually plays a joke with him. Like she's actually very smart and kind of tires him out, and all that story. And one thing I realized, and I know the story before, but the fact that there is not a happy ending, no
Yes.
marriage after all, no kissing, nothing, what happens if it was a male saving a female, they would be, hugging, kissing, and all that, but here the male wasn't happy. Yes, you saved me, but you don't smell good, you don't look good, what's that paper bag? You're in a paper bag, just go dress up.
Yeah, he didn't even say thanks.
Right. And one more point that I would like to make about this story is about the issue of power. So in a normal stereotypical story, the prince would go and fight the dragon using the sword or something like this, and then save the princess. But here, the source is not, bodily, this physical power, but rather the brain, the mind itself. So the source of power is kind of questioned here as well.
Yeah, I think that that's the reason that we picked this story, that it has lots of things like it doesn't have a happy ending at the end. It reverses the roles, the gender roles. You see the princess in the role of a rescuer, more powerful, but like the strength comes from not the physical strength, but the intellectual strength. And then eventually, the princess reaction, okay, you don't look like a princess, go look like a princess. And then she's like, okay, yeah, we're not getting married. Okay. So do you want to continue, Adnan? We are done with the major part of our webinar, but we want to remind you about your next block task. So I'll let Adnan to continue.
All right, so our blog task is, we have a number of questions here, of course, and we would like you to kind of use these questions as guide to kind of reflect on the webinar. But of course, you don't have to stick to these questions. You can come up with different questions as well. So when you do the assignment, it is important that you try to respond these questions by referring to our webinar. So it's a kind of reflection task.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So Denise, would you like to say more about that?
No, I mean, we'll post the questions as well into your Google Drive so that you can see the questions.
questions are already in the drive.
Okay, good. Yeah.
All right. So in our Google Drive, we have also additional sources. We have an interview form that you can use for your social responsibility project. It's a standardized questionnaire. If you like, you can use it. And there are sample lesson plans and also links for more resources that you can use to prepare your lesson plans, because you have a lesson plan assignment for this webinar as well. So also there are links to news articles. While preparing your lesson plan, you can use these news articles to do something, to design an activity. It could be a writing activity, for example, reading activity, and you can use these news articles. And also the case study, the sitting plan that we did in the breakout session 1, and also the paperback princess, they're all in the Google Drive.
Mm-hmm. So again, you have 1 week to do the blog task and then another week to do the lesson plan. Yeah.
All right, so here are some useful links, and they include some really good reads about gender as well. So following are also some YouTube videos. They're really enjoyable and they're really informative as well in terms of questioning gender roles and talking about or raising some awareness about gender inequality. You can also use these videos in your lesson plans as well. While preparing your lesson plan, you can use them some as listening activity, or just watch and then come up with some questions pretty while and post questions around these videos in your lesson plan.
Okay.
So yeah, here are the references when we prepared our webinar.
Do you have any questions for us, Marve, Selçuk, Serhat Hocam?
No.
Okay, good. So we'll probably send you emails about the workshop. I mean, you got one email, but we'll see if there is like, any following information that we need to share with you. We'll keep you posted. Okay. We will save this webinar and put it on the website.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for making the time.
Right.
Thank you for being with us.
Of course, for being with us too.